visit our website and see the calendar for the Catalyst trainings for this year. My name is Sean Nesbitt. I'm Chief Programs Officer for Florida Housing Coalition. Our primary presenters, though, today, Gladys Cook, who's our Resilience and Recovery Director and Technical Advisor and just all-around expert. And we're also joined by Blaze Denton, our Research Manager and Technical Advisor. And additionally on the line, we have Tamara West, who will be manning the questions. So as we go throughout, please feel free to put your questions in the questions box, and we will do our best to answer all of them throughout the broadcast. And if we can't get to you, we will definitely take note and try to get back with you after the broadcast is over. So just a real quick, we just want to poll to see who is on today. And just give me a second here, I will launch that poll. It's a couple more seconds there. All right, looks like we have about half local government, about another third nonprofit, and some others. So it's a good mix today. So today's agenda, we're gonna talk about preparing for the RFP process. So kind of the pre-work before you actually get into the design and issuing the RFP. So we'll talk about linking the RFP to housing needs, goals, and strategies. Talk about thinking about how you want to identify your preferred respondents, thinking about what you're going to offer in the RFP, and other resources, including human resources, and the timing for review. So kind of all of the things you do preparing for, planning for the actual RFP. And so linking the RFP, the housing needs, goals, and strategies. So one of the first things you want to consider is how will this RFP or what you're planning to do lead to benefits for the community. So even before you actually get into the drafting of the RFP, think about the target market you want to or should aim to reach. And this requires doing some market analysis, which we'll talk about a little later, but just, before even looking at some of your data sources, thinking about, what are underserved markets that you're just aware of, populations identified as a community priority through your various community meetings, AHAC meetings, different things that you know, what are some of the community priorities? And then how can the RFP promote any stated goals in your planning documents? So actually going and looking at your housing element, revisiting that in your comprehensive plan, looking at land use. For those of you that work in entitlement communities, looking at your consolidated plan and, what were some of the things identified there? What did some of the data say? What were some of the strategies you identified and projects that you want to, or types of projects you want to do? Assessments of fair housing, and any other plan that you've done, a housing action plan, any other sort of needs assessment, looking at those documents and revisiting those to see how this particular RFP addresses those goals or strategies or needs in those documents. And thinking about economic development goals. Will this create jobs, or will there be some other benefits even beyond the housing itself? Does it bring in additional public investment? Are you boosting up geographic areas of opportunity? These are just some things to think about, or providing housing within those areas of opportunity so that the residents that move in, have access to jobs and other things that are important. So these are some of the things to think about. Um, will it require agreements with service providers for those that don't necessarily provide housing but provide services? And is there general community support for developing a piece of property or a type of project that you want to pursue through your RFP? So some of the ways you can, get that through informal meetings. And also this can also help to think about, some of the resources that you're going to bring through the RFP, based upon what you're hearing from your nonprofits and others. Will it help them accomplish those things, and will it help you? So what are your nonprofits thinking about? What are they planning to do? Does it line up with the housing needs that you found in your documents or in your research, in your needs assessment? Does what they are planning to do line up with your anticipated RFP and RFQ priorities? What resources do they have, and what resources will they need? So these are things to think about as you're planning your RFP. And is there any way to support your nonprofits and others in preparation for your RFP? Is there some training or technical assistance that you can provide to respondents even prior to issuing the RFP, so that they're well prepared and can address any deficiencies ahead of time? And also, if there are partnerships that can be facilitated through that training and technical assistance. And so something consider is doing your own market analysis. So you can do it informally, just by looking at occupancy of similar developments, looking through your own portfolio and seeing how projects are performing. Doing your own kind of look through neighborhood conditions. So for example, if you have some lots you want to put out through RFP, um, your own kind of assessment of the trajectory of the neighborhood where they're located. How does your desired development compare to what others are currently doing in the market? Are there certain amenities that have become standard, for example? And is that something you want to include in the RFP? And stepping up above that, you might want to consider actually doing a formal market study of your overall housing market, maybe to discover some things you don't already have or haven't seen, or aren't apparent by looking, for example, through data in your consolidated plan, for example. So what you see on the screen here is a study that was done in the city of Jacksonville in 2015. And in your handouts, you have the update to this study from 2018. They called it their block by block study. And this is just an example of overall market housing analysis that was done. And we can take a look at that and see how that could potentially inform an RFP. So on this screen here, you see on the left-hand side, it's a map that shows how homestead exemptions are changing in certain neighborhoods. So you can see in the purple areas, homestead exemptions are going down, and in other areas, the brown or the orange homestead exemptions are going up. So you can surmise that in those areas, for example, where homestead exemptions are going down, you can see it relates to the map on the right, a lot of investor activity. And with that investor activity, they found that this is also where evictions are concentrated. So basically what this says is, this is creating some instability in these communities. So if we, as a local government, for example, have lots in those particular communities, that we want to put out through RFP. Maybe our goal is how can we, through our property, stabilize these communities? And so maybe we want to prioritize home ownership in our RFP for those particular lots. So this is kind of how looking at data, and this might be things you kind of know without even doing this type of thing, but this can really support your strategy by actually looking at the numbers, and that can actually back up why you're putting out the type of RFP that you are. Another thing here from that same study, it looks at displacement risk. And this is something that, you know, a lot of folks are looking at communities, seeing a rapid rise in pricing, displacement concerns as it relates to gentrification. And so this particular map on the left shows displacement risk in 2011, and then on the right shows displacement risk in 2016. And if you look at the Springfield community, for example, you can see how displacement risk has expanded. And so here again, if we are, you know, planning to do perhaps projects in the Springfield community, we might want to prioritize permanent affordability with our RFP for property or projects or financing projects in a community that has a high displacement risk. So these are just examples of how doing market studies and looking at data can really inform the design of your RFP. And I'm going to pass it off to Blaze Denton, our research manager, who's going to talk a little bit more about data.
Hey everybody. So yeah, there's kind of a direct sort of line through here. So the idea is, yeah, what questions are we going to ask? What data sources do we use to quickly answer these sorts of questions? You know, so that we don't spend all of our time doing market studies, but also that we have all the information we need to make good decisions. So if you want to click. So first off, just sort of broad kind of theoretical thoughts. How do we use data, right? And there's kind of three big buckets. First off, you know, we use data to make and evaluate good policy and good projects. You know, we use data. We say, you know, is this going to work? Who do we want it to work for most? And we look at information and we find, okay, yeah, this is serving the people we want and is actually working. Secondly, it's to educate others. You know, once we've made a decision, we present information, we present data, so that people can understand our reasoning and what's happening. And then third, for legitimacy, right? If we're just doing random stuff all the time, we're not going to be a legitimate organization. Funders aren't going to take us seriously if we're a government agency, like about half the people on the call. You know, people aren't going to trust government if you're just doing what you feel like. And so showing that you're doing the work, even if, you know, you end up coming to a solution that was what you thought in the first place. So next one. So real quick, some kind of definitions. There's a couple of different ways of like defining information or defining data, but one of the big category differences is quantitative versus qualitative data. So qualitative data is narrative data, narrative information, things like surveys, interviews, public comments, personal anecdotes, focus groups, right? And so developers will do this, local governments will do this, you know, talking to people, figuring out what do people actually want, right? So then there's also quantitative data, which is numerical data, stuff like how much a development costs, what the cost per in your area is, what the median income is, the population change. Those examples that Ashan was showing just now, right, where he shows the map and had the change over time and differing rates, that's quantitative data. Qualitative and quantitative data work together to provide a well-rounded view of a project or policy. So again, based on Ashan's example there, right, you're looking at change in the primary homestead, right, over time. You've got those numbers, and then maybe a second step would be to go and talk to some people and see why are people moving out, or why is all new development, new rental development, and then sharing those stories, and you have this tag team of both quantitative and qualitative data. So here's how do we think about questions. This is a one of the, like, a kind of clever sort of way of framing questions, and it's a matrix here of known, unknown, knowns, and unknowns. So a known is something that you kind of have the questions for, and then knowns are things that you have answers for. So up at the top, there's your core competencies. There's known knowns. So perhaps you'll have development costs. Off the top of my head, I can say, okay, this many people, or this is how much it costs to build a new home. Or what are the income limits in my community if I'm a SHIP admin. That's a known known. Core competency is something that you have immediate retrieval for. A known unknown is almost as easy. That's something you maybe don't know off the top of your head, but you have the questions for, right? So, and having the question is 90% of the work. So you might say, to plan for this RFP, we need to know what the median income for our community is, or we need to know how much land that we have, right? Knowing the question is half of the work, and then going and getting the answers for those questions, much less work. So there's unknown knowns. That one's a little trickier, but you're thinking of what biases do I have? What assumptions am I making that I'm not really showing to myself or to others? And how do I examine what am I making assumptions about, even before creating the policy or project? And then finally, the most difficult one is unknown unknowns, which is ones you don't even know to ask the question for, right? And so kind of part of the process of educating yourself, we're coming out with a data publication in a month or two here. Part of the process is, as you learn more things, fewer and fewer of those unknowns exist. Here are just some basic questions that we use kind of as a way to start sort of housing area analysis, right? How many housing units are there in my community? What income levels are most in need in housing? How many people in my community can afford housing? What are the neighborhoods or areas of highest need? Where is housing affordable and where is it expensive in my community? What are my construction costs? How much subsidy will we need? Where are housing and transportation costs highest, and how quickly are housing prices rising? So answering these, you start getting a pretty good idea of, like, here's where and in what way my community needs help. Yeah, and here, so we have, again, we're coming out with a data publication the next couple months here, and we'll have a long list with 50 or 60 different sources and notes and comments on how you can use them, how you can access them, but just a key data sources, things that you can look at tomorrow. The local planning documents, Sean talked about them a little bit, consolidated plans, analysis of impediments to fair housing, or AIs, and then other local documents or reports. If your community's already produced something, you might as well use it. Then the Schimberg Center for Housing Studies, they have a huge wealth of data. All of it's down to the community level. All of it's focused on housing. It's fantastic. They have everything from eviction rates to parcel data. So yeah, just check that out. Then of course the federal government, the American Community Survey, HUD's various surveys, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and then some other sources. And these are three that we found the most helpful, right? The C&T Index, Zillow, and Realtors data, and then the Florida Housing Coalition's annual Home Matters report, which starting this year, hopefully will be out in about a month and a half. We'll have a lot more local data, and you'll be able to click your county or community and really get down to the nitty gritty. So this is pretty brief. We're gonna have another webinar in a couple weeks here that'll go into more depth. But once you've got information, how do we sort of look at it? So first off, just always get those descriptive statistics. You look at sums, averages, medians, and ranges to kind of see, what's the total amount of housing, the total number of homes that are available. What's the average price, or the average size? You look at median, which is more like typical. What's the typical house cost? And then range, like how, do we have a lot of homes really close to the middle? Or are we seeing, a lot of very expensive and a lot of cheaper homes, and then very little available in that sort of middle range? You can do exploratory data analysis, which is where you start making graphs just before you've really thought about it, and that can help you explore, help you understand what you're actually looking at. You can use forecasting tools, and you can use pivot tables. So next guy here. Yeah, and then once you figured out what you want to say with your numbers, using a narrative and visualizations, you make your case, right? Both to to whoever you're trying to present to. And the easiest way to do this is for already visualized data, things like the CNT index, and the realtors data. Zillow already have this data visualized, and so saves you time, saves you energy. No reason to remake work. You can just cite it, use it and cite it, and get that one step faster there. Big numbers, just taking and having a couple, 2 or 3 numbers that are like really shocking, like 30% of our community is cost burden, can really break through people's cynicism, can really break through people's boredom, and really be like, oh man, that's extremely, and just limiting how many numbers you use, but just making them physically very large in your visualization, to really drive the point home. Obviously simple tables, which I think is more common. Excel though really allows you to take a lot of tables and turn them into visualizations that work just a lot more effectively. And then, like as Sean was showing, mapping is perhaps the most effective way to visualize a lot of this stuff, to really make an impact and show people actually what's happening. And then in the last couple of years, there's been a trend towards interactive online visualizations. Programs like Tableau and Power BI and ArcGIS Online really allow you to create something that is immediately accessible and that is interactive, which is really exciting for people. They can play around with it. So here's just like a brief example of sort of all those visualizations on one screen here. So at the top, you have those large numbers. Again, they really pop, they really drive kind of the main things that you're looking at. Then below that, I have large numbers, but that's actually a map, obviously, right? And so that a map lets you grasp things a little more effectively, and see that geographic difference that might be hidden in just a table or some numbers. And then you can have a chart, right? And so there's something like this is an interactive dashboard that allows people to play around with it. And so it includes all these various elements that can really help you visualize dramatically. So make your case, make your story. So that's it for me, and I think I'm handing it back to LaShawn.
Thanks, Blaze, for going through that and a nice preview for the upcoming webinar. But these are even some things you might want to include in your RFP when you get to it. Some of this data information and presentation. So I'm going to pass off to Gladys. And Gladys, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Oh my gosh. All right, I'll just start over. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I was saying that we have people here from Okaloosa to Key West, so it's really exciting to have everybody here. And I was putting it into context about the RFP process that local governments would be pursuing. and then your nonprofits and developers would also be pursuing. And sometimes a local government is just looking to do something local where they have local funding and they have a specific type of project that they're looking for. It's not a grant application. It's where you want a proposal to do something specific. And then there's also where developers are asking the local government to select them and give them local government contributions or local government area of opportunity status. And so to do that, the best way is to have an RFP process, a request for proposals, because you're probably going to have competing projects out there. So that's where we're putting all this in. And so I'm going to go through some of the types of solicitations that you would be doing, and then the key capacities that you're going to need to successfully implement that RFP. Because you want to have quality submittals, and then you want to have a quality product. So the RFP, everybody throws that around, request for proposals. And like I said, it's something where you may have land or you may have a need such as Blaze has identified, and you want to know what the world thinks they would do with it. So it's kind of a little bit of a blank slate, but it's also got some guidelines of what you're looking for. So you're going to get ideas and people's proposals. There's also the request for qualifications. And sometimes this is when it's a really, really big project and you want to know the people you're going to be working with before you even go forward. You might already know what the project is very specifically. Maybe it's to rehab a big historic building or something like that. So this is where it's focused on who's applying and do they have the qualifications that you're looking for. There's also the invitation to negotiate. And you see that mainly when there's maybe a large sum of money and that's already there that the city or county needs to do something with, and they know what they want to do, but they want to get a good deal and they want to hear what others would put in. So that's where you get, it's kind of like proposals, but it's where you can kind of go back and forth and there's a little competition. So there's other kinds of RFPs though. One that you do all the time is your incentives. And this is where you have your incentive plan in your local housing assistance plans, and a way to get people to apply for those. Sometimes there's funding for single family or multifamily projects. We'll get into some of those details. And like I said, the local government contribution for the Florida Housing Finance Corporation's request for applications. We say RFA all the time. Or the area of opportunity support for those RFAs. So the homeownership and the multifamily are going to be two different approaches, as you know, so the whole structure would be different with that. So this is when you have organizations come in, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, and the first thing you want to look at is their organizational capacity. And this gets built into your review process of what are we going to look at with them. Okay, we're going to look at their staff capacity. We want to see who their key staff are. We want their resumes. We want to know what their role is going to be in this and how much of their time we're going to get from the key staff. And the best way to do that is get an organizational chart from them. And that should show additional staff and support and who reports to who, so that you get a real good visualization of who's going to be working on the project. Now, with a nonprofit, you're going to want to look at their board of directors, and you can ask for bios of the board, maybe, you know, what part of town they live in, if they're a Choto, that type of thing. But it's where you want to see, maybe they don't have a lot of staff, but it's one of those organizations that the board is active in. So you want to see if the members of the board have the expertise needed to help the staff. Conflicts of interest can occur with boards. So you might want to be looking to see that the proposal isn't something that is heavily going to be conducted by one of the board members. So that could be a red flag. And then the financial capacity, you really want to know if they have the money to even start this thing. And most organizations have audits, audited financial statements, especially if they've been in business a few years. So it's perfectly fine to ask for the last 2 or 3 years of audits. And then you can also get their financial statements, their profit and loss for the last year, their current budget, and their assets and liabilities. You definitely want to be looking at the balance sheet to see how deep they are into other projects, and if they have a lot of debt that is going to be competing with doing your project. And then the ability to guarantee financing. This is where Florida Housing, especially, you're going to need somebody that with deep enough pockets that is going to make some guarantees that the project will get built. The other way to do it, of course, is with the bond, but the bonding capacity is still going to be based on somebody in the organization that has financial capacity. It's really important. So you also want to know how they're going to manage the property. You know, when the developer's gone, it's the property managers that you're going to see every day that are helping the people in the community live there. So property management companies are sometimes connected to the developer, which is great. Sometimes the developer uses other, or the owner will use other property management companies, but you want to make sure that this is an experienced company that has done this size of development, and then get the information on are those properties fully leased. That's really important because you don't want to have empty units in your project. So you can look at their financials, their operating costs and their revenue, and make sure that the rent they're collecting is going to cover their expenses. And then, are their properties in good physical condition? I say go look at them. If you get something in, go check it out and see if it will fit in your community. We've seen cases where big developers, small developers, when they apply into a public forum, they don't want all of their proprietary information and their financials spread all over town. And I don't have an answer for that. I'm not an attorney or anything like that, but I have seen ways that the local government was able to somewhat protect the privacy, the propriety of that information. So also look at what services either the management company or the owners will be providing for the residents. Blaze was talking about different homeless, serving homelessness and different things. So you want to make sure that this developer is in tune with that that's their mission, that's what they do, and that the services they have are accessible. And by that, I mean, do you have to pay for the services? If you got special needs, do they have to pay for the pizza, or does it just come on Friday? That kind of thing. So get to know that. So you may have a sole developer come in. It's highly likely you'll have a partnership or a joint venture. This is common in affordable housing. Developers and nonprofits get together all the time. So you want to look at how they're splitting that responsibility up, and if the nonprofit is there for the long term, and who's going to be doing what to make sure it operates. And track record, definitely you can have a chart that says what projects are completed and operating, the value of the project, how long ago it was, and is it complete? So you can ask for all that. So the applicant, not only must they be a good developer for what you're trying to do, but they're probably going to be applying for other money from you. And so you want to make sure that they would fit into your existing programs. Maybe they don't, and they're not going to be asking for, say, SHIP or something like that. But think about that. If your other programs disqualify these applicants, you might want to wiggle one way or the other. So I'm going to talk about the nonprofit set aside with Florida Housing Finance Corporation. And we always at the Florida Housing Coalition want local governments to support their nonprofits. So this is an opportunity for your nonprofits to be part of a large project if they go through Florida Housing. And the Internal Revenue Code, which governs the low-income housing tax credits, that requires that at least 10% of the state's allocation of credits be set aside for nonprofits for qualified low-income projects. And the state gets an allocation of credits every year, and that's put into something called a qualified allocation plan. And you can find that on Florida Housing's website. It's a simple document, but it's very powerful. And it'll say something like, this year we are going to take care of youths aging out of foster care, something like that. But Florida Housing has a higher ratio than the 10%. And so that percent is in there every year. A qualified nonprofit organization must own an interest and materially participate in the development and operation throughout the compliance period. This is not for your suitcase nonprofit that is just on the application. This is for nonprofits that are they are owners, they have equity in it, and then they're involved in the project. The definition of that is the organization has to be a 501c3, C4, or 501a, and they can't be affiliated or controlled by a for-profit company. And so one of their exempt purposes of their organization has to be fostering low-income housing, kind of like a CHODO, but so that's what the nonprofit organizations are. So you need to make sure that if they're coming into you with a proposal to go to Florida Housing and you're not sure about that nonprofit, you need to figure that out, because the worst thing you can do is put everything you've got behind this project and it goes up and it fails in the application process. So, and then, like I said, really try to be in touch with your developer community, your nonprofits and your for-profits. It's nice to have local developers if they can qualify for the bigger financing deals. So, and then they will be going through underwriting. You will be watching them go through underwriting. You're going to do a mini underwriting when you select them. And you're going to be looking at these three things: the organization's capacity to do that development, and that means their financials and their experience and their staff. And then you'll be looking at the project feasibility. Will this project be able to be built with the funding they're looking at? Will they be able to operate with the rents they're expecting to come in? And then the ability to proceed, you might have some control over that, because that means that they can get their permits and they can start the project. They have to get permitting when they go into credit underwriting. And so all that zoning and any kind of variances, anything like that needs to already be in place. So when you're doing your RFP, you're up front and you're going to see things that may not have the ability to proceed. So you want to support that, support them, and support and patience goes both ways. It's a long process. So I'm still on, right, Ashan? I think you go now. Ashan?
I go.
Okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
Glenn.
I'll advance your slides for you.
Sure. So now we're going to talk about identifying what you're planning to offer.
Woo, that was a lot.
So it's good to know, be thinking about what you're going to offer ahead of time, and figure out how that works into all of the things that Gladys just talked about. And even though you're going to go through that whole process again, it's good to think about ahead of time what you're going to be looking for in your respondents, because all of that information is going to need to go in the RFP. So what are you planning for? Are you planning to offer land? Are you planning to offer money, incentives? Is it all of the above? So this is something to really consider. And, what you offer may be a function of, what you have, and also a function of, some of those informal meetings, going back to your data and thinking about how what you do have fits into what you need and what folks are able to do. And so if you are offering land, again, that readiness to proceed is going to be a big part, particularly for those that you're kind of the first evaluator before it goes to Florida Housing, for example, or other places. So if you have land, you want to evaluate the site. First of all, thinking about site control, if you have site control, or if there's some issues with that. Are you planning to do a ground lease? Does there exist enough infrastructure? Are utilities on the site? Are there some environmental issues? So this is kind of the overview, and we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about some of these. So if you're offering land, make sure that there's no title issues with that. Sometimes, we get land, there might be some title issues or some title clearing that has to take place before that land can really be put out for RFP. So you want to make sure that, all the title issues have been addressed, that there are adequate utilities on site, that zoning and land use, and this is really something that you can address and be a big help to respondents, is to take care of the zoning and land use issues prior to. For example, if you want to facilitate, missing middle, have that conversation, with your zoning and land use folks to make sure that, you can accomplish on that piece of property what you desire to do. And also, of course, thinking about neighborhood considerations. So legal, we just talked about title history and taking care of known encumbrances. Planning, making sure that, the site is adequately zoned. As Gladys talked about, permits are going to be required. So thinking about ahead of time, the timing to obtain those permits for those that are going to be responding to it. So, understanding the site plan process, any environmental issues, and how long it's going to take to get to that final building permit, and kind of planning that into your process and building that time frame into your RFP process is really something to get a handle on. Also, any anticipated impact fees, maybe that's an incentive that you might offer in addition to the land, and just kind of thinking about all the costs and processes related to the planning and building process and how that relates to, what you're offering in the RFP, as well as the timing of the RFP. Environmental issues, are there previous uses that have created issues on the site? Will it need some cleanup? Those are things that as you can address or make known, or make sure those things so that they're in the RFP. If there's buildings on there, what's the age, the type? Think about whether you want, or if they're going to be demolished or incorporated. Any environmental constraints, wetlands, endangered species, is it a brownfield? All of these things you want to kind of do your own evaluation before putting land out for RFP. And the location, think about the neighborhood. Where is it? Is it close to jobs, transportation, the schools in the area, healthcare, shopping, all the things that folks need and want to be close to? Is it within CRA, for example, or places within your geography that might have other local initiatives that perhaps could layer on additional funding. So think about that. And of course, the location in relation to similar developments. Is it, across the street from the development that was built last year that's struggling to lease up? Those are things you might want to consider when looking at a particular site that you're thinking about putting out through RFP.
Let's take some questions. We had some up there, didn't we? Hello from the West Tampa CDC. Hello. Talk about land trust as an approach to preserving affordable housing. Yeah, we asked you, is this a question or just a recommendation? I'm going to talk a little bit about some of that preservation. And what if the nonprofit is new with no money and just starting? They're probably not ready for something at this level. We work with those nonprofits with the pre-development loan program, and we get them when they're brand new, and they're just not ready to respond to these things. Maybe if they already have expertise in some type of service that's going to be offered, but you really need to be careful with that capacity. You want to support them, but they need to grow, and you can help them grow. Okay. Sean mentioned, when a local government has land and they're putting it out there. We saw an example this year where there was an RFP that CRA was offering the land, and they would be letting the developer build homes on it for sale. And then when the homes sell, then that land is released from the ownership of the local government. And their agreement was a development agreement. Well, the development agreement, that doesn't convey any type of title, sort of ownership. And so that organization couldn't put any liens on the land. And so, when you go into PLP or, further into the housing, or like a construction loan, they're going to want to put a lien on there. So think carefully about that structure of the agreement, okay, that you make. So on with surplus lands. One of the main reasons local governments want to do this process is because they have some land. And Florida has a surplus land statute. There's the 125.379 for counties, and then 166.0451 for municipalities. And that requires all municipalities and counties, whether they are SHIP or not, to create an inventory list of real property with fee simple title appropriate for affordable housing. And that has to have the address on it, the legal description, and whether it's vacant or improved. The list has to be reviewed at a public hearing, and then it can be revised at the conclusion, and then that list is adopted by resolution. That's what the law says. So there are these lists out there, and if you're a local government that has this list and you're conveying one of those sites, then that's probably where this fits in. A lot of the land that you have, local governments has old liens on it. You might have got it by a tax deed, but there could still be a chain of title that hasn't really been cleared out. There could be multiple owners. And so I have this here: do not transfer properties with title issues. Well, it's okay if your transfer mechanism, it'll probably be some kind of a deed, says in it that when the organization gets their permits for housing or gets it developed, that those liens will be removed. And that seems to be okay with the underwriting that we've seen with Florida Housing. It goes, the title will say, have that in it in Schedule B, and then they can look over that. I don't know if you can do something like that with something really big like tax credits. So think about offering clear title just as a matter of business. So again, prioritizing nonprofits in the disposition of surplus land, and maybe only nonprofits could have the surplus land. and require that there be permanent or long-term affordability when you're using your treasure, your surplus land. You don't want to see that go back into the private market in a few years. So I mentioned to addressing those marketable title and the environmental issues. The title can really slow things down, so it's a thing. We always say pray for clear title. So you may be offering financial subsidies. Be aware of what it is you're offering, what the time frame for that money is, where it came from, and that it's going to have strings attached to it. You might want to use that for things that are kind of outside of the construction, which could be to buy land for pre-development expenses, infrastructure, or purchase permanent loans, purchase assistance. And I highlighted infrastructure there. We just heard about some lots in a big city that are in the urban area, and they're like worth $12,000, and it costs $30,000 to hook up sewer and water to it. And so if that's what you're offering, please consider how that infrastructure will fit into the affordability and see if you can help with that. So your other financial funding is, when does it have to be encumbered and expended, and how are you going to do the compliance and enforcement for that? So you're going to be looking at the financial feasibility of the deal, and these are the things that could be on your checklist of part of your selection criteria. And so you're going to be looking at the acquisition and land costs if they're buying the land. Okay, appraisals would probably come in handy. Get their hard construction costs and their construction contingencies. Look at how their architectural design and supervision and engineering will take place, who's doing that. You can ask for all of those contractors and vendors. The financing costs, sometimes that's a hidden expense, and they say, well, we're going to get a loan, a bank or some community development financial institution, something like that. Well, that money costs money, and so sometimes there's a fee that they have to pay right up front. So you look for that, and then you help them figure out if that's there or not. We talked about permitting and zoning. There's insurance that would be required, of course, just liability while they have the land, and then there's builder's insurance, and then ongoing. And you have a right to require, of course, that you're indemnified for the term of affordability or whatever when you're putting money in it. So have that set up. If they're coming in with occupied property, you really want to run? No. If it's occupied, you will deal with relocation and you will be paying for it. So just be ready for that expense. It's not cheap. And it's not only that it's not cheap, but you need a plan for where people go. And sometimes you need to have on hand a relocation expert to help with that. And then the project reserves, you can require up front how much money they're going to stow away every year per unit that would be used for, say, operating reserves or maintenance reserves or capital improvement reserves. And then their developer fee, you will see that in their proposal, and you want to know what it is. Florida Housing limits the developer fee to 16%. They go up to 18% for some special needs projects, and they even go up to 21% if that part of the developer fee goes into their reserve account. So it's kind of a good deal that way. Again, look at the sources of funding that they're going to be using to build the project. You want to make sure that they have enough money to build it, but that they don't have too much money, because then you don't need to give them as much subsidy or whatever it is you're offering. Look at the percentage of cost that your funding is going to cover. If it's like 110%, that's not good. So you'll be leveraging no matter what. depending on the type of project. So decide on what that's going to be. And then how much of that is and when that money needs to come in. If they're coming in with a proposal for Florida Housing and that cycle is in maybe 4 months, then they're going to go through this application process, they get their award, and then they go into credit underwriting, and then you don't need to put your money in until they're ready to probably break ground. And so that you're going to have that money when the time comes, and you really don't need to advance any money that's in caps there. So learn how to see their operating budget. They're kind of simple. It's just a list of expenses that will occur, the management fee, utilities for common areas, salaries, maintenance fees, equipment, things like that, pest control, security. And they should have a monthly and an annual estimate of that. And then you look at that, and then you look at their revenue that they're saying is going to come in, and make sure that there's not too much cash flow or not enough cash flow. You have to find the balance. So are the operating expenses reasonable? You can look at other properties, their appraisal. Anything that goes into Florida Housing gets a major appraisal and a major market study, and they also get a project cost analysis, and you have a right to see all of that, and that'll help you understand the costs for the developments. Is net operating income sufficient to meet debt service coverage requirements? Yeah, you want to make sure that they can pay their debt, but again, not too much, not too little. So thinking about the application procedures, there's 3 types. The incentives, when you are offering things from your incentive plan that anybody can apply for, that should be kind of an application process that, or they can appeal it, and it's based on a project. It's not something that is just out there to get, okay? Then there's the local government contribution. That's a technical term, and that's with Florida Housing Finance and your local housing finance authorities, and it's competitive, and it'll be money that you are paying into that project at the right time. Then there's the local government area of opportunity, and that's what most of these RFPs are about. And this is where you get that competition I've been talking about, where you're looking for good developments. Go into these a little more here. So the incentives, they should be rolling and open year round. You should know exactly what incentives are available, and if there are things that have to be negotiated. Maybe you've seen things pop up that are needed when you're doing your informal reviews for developments, if you're in the planning and building part of this. And so you might see this pattern of things that you want to offer. So when somebody applies for that, there's a formal application. They identify the project, where it is, and describe it, and then discuss the problem that needs one of your incentives. These projects are hot, and it's really important to understand that how timely your responses need to be, not only for approving incentives, but also the cycle, the RFP, so that they know what's happening. And then there are some incentives that qualify with the local government contribution requirement with Florida Housing, so you can look for that. So the RFA, the local government contribution, every RFA is different. There are about 20 RFAs. Florida Housing used to have a universal cycle with 1 application every year, if you can believe it or not. And they realized that the nonprofits weren't competing. They weren't getting kind of specialized housing for homeless or special needs. Big counties were getting all the money. And so they brilliantly just broke it all up into about 20 RFAs a year, and they're very specialized, and they're very sensitive to what the current needs are in the state, and in different areas and with different populations. And so every year there's a cycle where they put out what's going to happen this year, how much money will be under each of them, and when those applications will open and when they'll close. And so those happen all year round. So they're kind of grouped. There's like the low-income housing tax credits, and those they start announcing them in the fall, and they're due usually by December, and then those awards start happening. But you need to look at what that schedule is so that you're ready for it. That's right, I was talking about local government contributions, sorry. So the amount of what you're going to be asked for is in that RFA, and it's different. Sometimes it's a lot of money. It's like 300,000, 460,000. So you'll know that if you've seen it before, that's been pretty stable. And then if you're going to just do the money part, then you can, do this a notice of the funds availability. That's what your housing finance authorities do. Or you could just kind of have it open for different types of projects. So like I said, you don't need to disperse it until you're closing on the award. How much is too much? That's going to be a math thing. And, you always want to make sure that there's enough money, but not too much money. So more on that, if it's a rehab project, they automatically are getting the 5 points. And then they have to demonstrate local government support in the form of grants, loans, fee deferrals, or waiver of fees. And there will be a minimum contribution stated in each RFA. They use the net present value calculation for loans and deferral of fees. So if you're giving money now, or the deferral now, then they look at the value of it using the net present value for when they're going to get it, how long it's going to take. So there are some incentives that you're used to offering that are not approved by Florida Housing, so really review that carefully. And this is not the local government areas of opportunity contributions, that's different. So inside each RFA, there's forms for the grant, the fee waiver, the loan, or the fee deferral, and that's what you're going to be asked to commit to. So yeah, the local government area of opportunity is a way that Florida Housing encourages the local government to participate in the process. And so they have funding goals in certain RFAs. It's not in all of them, and you'll see it. You can just scan for that language, local government area of opportunity, and find out if it's there. Sometimes there's a higher minimum contribution required than the local government contribution. So look for that. If sometimes you can't do this 2 years in a row. Sometimes if a project had it, you'd select it and it still didn't make it, they can come back. So you watch for that in the RFA. So these contributions have to be in the form of a loan or grant, or as a permanent source of financing. So really be careful with what you're offering when you're giving that designation. Like here's some things: fee waivers, the contributions from the developer, from the PHA, or the donation of land. The donation of land doesn't count. They're really looking for cash. And you can make it a loan that is long-term. So is this still me, Sean? No, it's still me. Okay. So just a little bit more context. We do have 2 more of these in this series, and so we're going to get more and more detailed. But this is kind of a preview of what's to come. So the timing of the thing is critical, because by the time you advertise and go through your procurement and then do your review and then your selection, and then you kind of negotiate to make sure, they need to have that box checked on the form when they're doing their application. The applications sometimes are only open for a month. And so it's up to you to calibrate that. And we get calls all the time, am I too late or not? And so, you know, we can help you make sure you are doing the timing right, but you don't want to be the kind of thing where you just stall it and it takes forever, because it's really critical to make it work. You can't do this alone. Okay, you can't start it and then expect somebody else to take it over. You're really going to need to have a team together. And these are just some suggestions. So it'd definitely be your housing staff. If you have social services staff that are going to be looking at some type of special need, your planning staff for sure, because there's always going to be questions about you know, land use and zoning, whether you're giving the land away or if they come up with the site, you really need those folks to look at that site to make sure it meets all the criteria. The building department can come into play, especially if it's a rehab. Economic development people too, because like if you're expecting to create jobs, or it's in a CRA or mixed use, maybe you want retail mixed in with it, it's good to have those folks there. You always need your legal staff. You're going to really rely on them later when it comes to the agreements. And then the king is the procurement department. Nothing gets by without them sealing it. And they are so helpful with telling you what your swim lane is and what you can and you cannot do. So make sure you have a good relationship there to work with them. Just a little bit about more guidance on the RFA funding process and local government role. And I mentioned this cycle, this annual cycle. So just really start reading that when it comes out. It comes out in the early spring of just this table of what's going to come and when, and they don't have them all on there. So you have to keep watching for when they update it for each one. And then when the RFA comes out, that's when you can really see what the local government contribution requirement is, or if there's an area of opportunity in it. Every single RFA has a workshop, and their workshops are very transparent and open, and they have the agenda pretty much. It's a big agenda. It says what they're going to offer with that RFA, and you can ask questions, you can make comments. It's very helpful. So get involved with that process. And then you're going to have all these forms you have to fill out and sign. So whoever's going to be signing these things, look at the forms and see what you need to verify. But you're going to have to verify that they have zoning and land use, or that they will. You have to verify that there's central sewer and water, if that's is there a requirement. You're not going to be able to sign that if it's 5 years out and half a mile away. So be very aware of that. Once an award is made at the big day, and they get the award, and then the developers get an invitation to credit underwriting, within 21 days, the developer has to put these things in. So they have to show that they did their environmental, and then if they needed a phase 2, that they did that. And then they have to really verify that infrastructure, which is also electricity and roads. And so you need to do that inside your RFP process, so you know that when that happens, that they can get through that process. So a little guidance when you're thinking about going through this, and everybody starts somewhere. Just have an informal meeting to figure out, what you want to go for. And definitely now you have these market need tools that Blaise was talking about. So, really look at the needs and capacities for what you're looking for. Understand your market, and then the funding and procurement rules, both within and without your organization. And then, you can prepare your final RFP. All there we are. I got some questions here.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at them as well. I think two of them are combined.
Okay, go. You tell me.
Okay, yeah, so it says, can we elaborate further regarding affiliation in regards to a nonprofit that cannot affiliate with a for-profit? For example, a nonprofit was founded by GC, they are separate entities, so can we not work with them, is the question.
Yeah. You know, I had this case in another state. I was doing technical assistance, and this general contractor created their own nonprofit, and yeah, they were legally separate, but I don't like it. It's self-serving, and it's just not no, I don't like it. That's all I have to say. I'm not a lawyer, but it just doesn't smell right to me.
Is it allowable if they're not under the same affiliation, like a nonprofit and a for-profit, as long as they're two separate, like entities altogether, or is that the question?
Well, the thing is, the nonprofit to be qualified as in the nonprofit type RFAs, they have to be 51% owner for one thing, and then they have to materially participate. And so if you have a nonprofit that was created by a for-profit, what does that mean? Who's on the board? Do they have similar people that are controlling? Is it controlled by that for-profit? Okay, so there's that. Yeah, but if that went into Florida housing, I really don't know where or if it would hit a roadblock. They would look at it.
The next question we have is, how do you assure permanent or long-term affordability for surplus land for homes built for resale?
Say that again.
How do you ensure permanent or long-term affordability for surplus land for homes built for resale?
Okay. Well, you can do permanent or long-term, according to the Florida Housing Coalition, it's like 99 years. Okay. So you would need a community land trust to really steward a 99-year ground lease. If you're going to be donating land to be built on, and it's going to be home ownership, you're going into a special category of people that cannot buy on the private market. They can't even buy even in the regular moderate market. So you're serving a lower income, because people who can afford to buy a house that has no long-term requirements, they will. They're not going to do this. So it's kind of an income thing. It's a program thing, and so there's the land trust part of it. The other thing there's deed restrictions, and I'll let Ashan turn his mic on, because he does a lot more with community land trusts than I do.
Yes, I think you covered it well. I think you assure the permanent or long-term, either through a ground lease or a deed restriction. And in addition to that, if you're the local government, for example, if you're not the ground lease, if you're not the landowner, you're of course partnering with the 501c3. But if you are, or if you're doing a deed restriction, you would have monitoring systems in place. And we'll be doing a whole workshop on that on the 28th. So please do come back for that.
Okay.
And those were all the questions so far. Okay, so another question that's popped up. Is it possible to access a recording of this webinar? Yes, it will be made available. Is it automatically emailed, or just have to go back to the website?
I don't think it's in your email. You can go on to within 24 hours, we have these things uploaded under previous trainings on our website. And if you have any trouble with that, just email us, okay? And the other thing is, we get questions all the time about RFP, so absolutely feel free to send us your questions. We'll look at it for you. You know, just let us know, because more and more of these RFPs are needed to get what the city and county want. So we're just really pleased to help with that. Okay. That's a nice comment there. Tamara, are you going to read us that?
Yeah, this is great information. I'm learning a lot. Attending workshops like this allow nonprofits to better impact the people we serve. Thank you.
There you go. Okay. All right. Sean, do you have some closing comments? Tamara, you're next. You're doing the one next week, right?
Yeah, I'm all excited. So I'm listening to all the stuff that you guys are doing, and I'm getting my stuff geared up for next week's presentation.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to nail this. Okay, Sean?
I have no comments, but go to the next slide. You can see what's coming up for next week.
I thought I was done.
And
Yeah, there
definitely,
she is.
Tamara West will be our primary presenter next week. So I hope that you all come back. She's going to get into detailed components of RFPs and RFQs and invitations to negotiate. So we'll differentiate between those and what the components are. And I revisit some of this talk on incentives and designing the process and documents. And if you download the attachment, the handout includes the PowerPoint for today with the registration link for next week's session.
Okay. And oops, there's our publications. Look at them all.
Yeah, so
Okay.
all of our publications are available for free on our website. You can download all of these. So any topic that you're interested in, we likely have a guidebook that talks about it. So please do visit and download those.
It's like the surplus land one there on the bottom row, and that's a goodie. And then we have a credit underwriting guidebook somewhere too. Look at that. And the Affordable Housing Resource Guide has a page on every kind of funding, you know, if you're looking for different things. So, okay.